Welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Meligan. Today's guest is Ryan Heath. He's the president and CEO of the Gavel Project, an anti-woke nonprofit 501c3 legal organization in Arizona that exists to protect the freedoms of Americans, especially parents and children. Ryan's a constitutional expert and a talented legal strategist. He's a civil rights activist, an Arizona attorney, but most importantly, he's a husband and father of two young girls. And I've got two, well, not so young girls, but I can relate what you're going through there, Mr. Ryan. So we're going to talk to Ryan today about his life and career and where he's at right now in time. Ryan, welcome to Settlement Pros.
Thank you, Jack. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to talk to you as someone who loves to litigate, because that is what we do at Heath Law and at the Gavel Project.
Yes. Well, we just saw each other in Las Vegas at the COVID litigation conference number 2. We first met at number 1 last March out in Atlanta. Glad we're finally getting this podcast done. I've been wanting to get you on here for that entire time. Looks like if that's a live shot out your back window there, looks like a nice sunny day in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah, not bad. This is why we live here, because you get days like this that are 73 degrees and beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think
thunderstorms tomorrow though, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I spent a couple of years there in college, in Scottsdale in the mid 70s, a long time ago. Loved Scottsdale and loved Arizona. So, get back every chance I get. So Ryan, I always like to start off by, going right back to the beginning. And the beginning is when you were born, where you were born, and your family situation. So, when were you born and where?
I was born in 1992 here in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm a younger attorney.
Native.
Yeah.
All right. And how many in your family?
I have an older sister and a younger brother, and they're both doing well as well. They've got a lot of nieces and nephews right now.
Wow, that's an interesting dynamic because usually the middle child in the 3 is kind of the renegade, Ryan, and the fearless one, the one that has no pain threshold. Does that kind of describe you, maybe?
Yeah, I was so bad that I had to go live in the woods for 2 months when I was a 17-year-old in high school, and had to go to a therapeutic boarding school for 10 months after that. So,
oh my,
it was the renegade. I had some issues with drugs when I was younger. I blew my left knee out 4 times playing football before I was 17. I had to have 2 surgeries, and I never really stopped taking the Oxycontins. And so it kind of hit rock bottom
with that.
Yeah, well, it's
situation. Wow.
They're in everyone's pain, they're in everyone's cabinets, they're medicine cabinets. It's so easy to get your hands on these drugs. So after my second surgery, I just never really stopped taking them. And I had some behavioral issues. I've always been a little bit defiant when it comes to authority, which perhaps is why I'm a good attorney. But I went through the ringer when I was younger, and I came out the other side better for it.
So let's go back to your early life. And I want to ask you about your parents. What did your mom do? What did your dad do?
My mom is a dietitian and my dad is in real estate. So very simple.
Yeah. And what were the conversations like around the dinner table at night?
Pretty normal. I was an athlete growing up. That was really my focus, was playing football year round, and baseball as well. Tackle football year round is not the smartest thing to do for your kids, by the way. I played year round for 3 years in middle school, and my body is completely destroyed now because of it. I still have hip pain, back pain, mainly from having my left leg locked in a brace for so long, over multiple periods of time throughout my adolescence. So I wouldn't recommend that parents put their kids in tackle football generally, but if you're going to do it, make sure they give the kids some time to rest. It was not smart. I was a bit obsessive with it. So that was always my dream, was to play college football. I was never really big enough or fast enough, but I sure played like I was big enough and fast enough when I was on the field. And I'm blessed I didn't end up doing that. I think I would have ruined my body had I actually tried.
So besides your sporting endeavors, um, what was your early schooling like? You went to public school?
I did, yeah. So I grew up in Scottsdale. I have a bit of a unique background in that I have ADHD. It's very apparent. It wasn't caught though until I was a sophomore in high school. So, from the time I was in kindergarten up until that point, I basically failed my way up the ladder. Didn't really learn anything. Had a really hard time paying attention. I grew up in the principal's office, to be blunt with you. I really didn't like listening to my teachers and didn't appreciate what they had to say a lot of the time. So I think it had to do with me being bored in class, because when I got medicated for my ADHD, I went from being an F student to an A student. And I realized for the first time when I was in high school that I could actually pay attention, that I could be a good student. I was actually pretty smart. So I'm very blessed to have had that opportunity to really get tested and figure out sort of what was wrong with me and my capacity to pay attention. And now I'm thriving.
Wow, what a story. So, um, a lot of time in the principal's office. I mean, what does that, what does that do to you with regard to your relationships to your friends and kids, that you grew up with? And what kind of situation does it create for you at home with dad and mom?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had some rough times with my parents. Obviously, when I was growing up, I didn't like listening to them. I always, my parents got a breathalyzer at one point when I was in high school, and I would come home and try to set records on it. So that was sort of the dynamic in my household. Had some issues, getting along with them and getting along with my siblings, but I really did work that out when I went to the therapeutic boarding school after I lived in the woods for a few months in the therapeutic wilderness program. So I turned my life around. I met my wife when I was 19. Was really blessed to meet her at a young age, and we got married at 21. So I knew from the outset, the first day I met her, that I wanted to marry her. Um, and it's been a really wonderful life with her since then. We went through undergrad together. I ended up paying for school on my own. Essentially, I had my college paid for, but I spent all that money on getting through these therapeutic programs. And so I was forced to work. I worked two jobs at one point, three jobs at one point, actually full time all the way through. I took an extra year in my undergrad to graduate. I graduated debt free and I paid for it on my own. So
Yeah,
I
that's awesome.
worked my ass off and didn't
Yeah.
go to parties really all that much. I didn't go to football games. I was always working. So I wanted to make sure that I could make something of myself, and I've been able to do that.
So growing up, the you started playing football at a young age, got into sports. Um, I suppose that was somewhat of maybe a release, blow off
Yeah,
steam,
absolutely.
maybe. Um,
I like to hit people. That's what I. Yeah, you played middle linebacker, and as a fourth down quarterback, if they needed to get a yard or two, they'd give me the ball, and I put my head down and run someone over. So that was. I liked the contact. I liked the altercation aspect of the game, and I actually get to enjoy that now as an attorney. I found the one job where I really get to be an aggressive advocate at times and call people out and really have a good civil fight with them in the
yeah.
courtroom and outside the courtroom.
So when you were going through grade school, Ryan, and having these issues that you described, any teachers in particular that stood out to you, either good or bad, that made a difference in you?
I don't remember much of my time with my teachers as a child. I think I did too many drugs in high school to really have a good recollection of specific events. But I will say that my third grade teacher, Miss Weiler, had a pretty big impact on me. She knew I was struggling in school to pay attention. Knew I was having these issues with behavioral aspects of my life, and she pulled my mom aside and basically told her like, "Hey, he's not dumb. He just has a hard time paying attention, and he just needs to be challenged and stimulated." And so I wish I had really gone through the battery of testing then, but we ended up doing it. And unfortunately, we're took a couple of years for me to figure out sort of what was going on inside of my head that wasn't consistent with other people's normal folks' brains.
Wow, what a story. Um, and nowadays, not all that uncommon. I mean, my understanding is, and I think a lot of us have an understanding that this affects a lot more kids than we really have known.
Yeah.
I I don't remember much of it growing up, although I did have a classmate down in California that now I clearly realize looking back that he definitely had some ADHD problems, but I don't remember too many other kids having that, but it certainly seems to be much more prevalent
Yeah,
nowadays.
I would agree.
So did you have any close friends in grade school?
Yeah, I had plenty of close friends. I used to go over to my buddy Colby's house all the time and ride, bikes and jump off, hit dirt jumps and do all sorts of stupid stuff. And it missed my childhood. It was a lot of fun here.
And what's are you in touch with Colby now?
Occasionally, yeah. I don't really talk to many friends from high school anymore. Most of them have moved on with their lives, including myself, and have really gone in different directions. So I don't have much of an interest, to be blunt with you, in connecting with people that when I was doing drugs with back in high school, and the folks that really I was around when my life fell apart. As a father, a young father, I'm really focused on my kids and on my family right now.
So you say your life fell apart. I mean, what happened there?
Yeah, so I think I went a bit off the rails when I realized, after my fourth knee blowout, after the second surgery, that I wasn't going to be able to, achieve my dream that I've been working towards my entire life of playing
And
college
how old were
sports.
you at that time? What grade were you in?
I was a junior. I was 17.
And what high school? Scottsdale High?
Chaparral High School. Yeah,
Chaparral.
Chaparral High School
Yeah,
in Scottsdale.
yeah, you bet. Um, so that happened your junior year?
It did, yeah. I ended up having 44 truancies my junior year. Towards the end of the year, I just stopped going to school after lunch because I was skipping class to get high.
Wow. So then what was the changing moment? What happened?
I would say it was in wilderness and in during the therapeutic boarding school program that I went to in Utah. Realizing that I really had hit rock bottom. I was throwing my life away, and I had a lot of potential, and I wanted to succeed. So I wanted to prove to myself and to the folks around me that I could be successful. So I've basically just been working as hard as I possibly can since that moment to make something of my life.
So then you went there during junior year, junior summer. What was the time frame?
Yeah, junior summer, I ended up graduating in August of 2011 from high school. So I missed my senior year completely.
They just graduated you out?
Yeah, from the program. So I graduated from the Oakley School in Oakley, Utah.
Oh, okay. So you essentially that was your senior year.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Okay. So how did that happen that you got sent up there?
Well, I made a bunch of stupid mistakes and was hanging out with the wrong people and was not really was trying to throw my life away in a lot of respects when I was that old. I got really depressed when I had blown my knee out so many times and I wasn't able to play football in the way that I wanted to, or I saw my dreams kind of crumbling before my eyes, and so it caused me to kind of go off the rails. But I'm sure glad that I went to that program. I know a bunch of
So,
people that went and
I
didn't
mean,
really.
did you look it up and decide to go there, or who
No,
made?
my parents sent me there. It was very much a unilateral decision.
Okay. So things were rough enough that they decided they had to take another move, and a pretty dramatic one.
Yeah.
I have a friend that had to do the same thing with one of his sons and send him to Montana, and it straightened him out too. That's interesting. That's well, I'm kind of digging into it because all of these things that happen to us, right, over life. I mean, they all lead us. All of those incidents and accidents, they lead us to where we are right now. And I don't want to rush to that point because I know it's going to be very interesting where you're at right now, but it gives us and it gives the audience a flavor of what formed you, what formed this guy and turned him into what he is today. And this is an amazing story. I mean, I haven't had anybody that's had this kind of a story in their younger life. And that's probably because, most people that go through this, Ryan, they don't make it out of it. Right.
They don't. A lot of the people that I went to the therapeutic programs with, didn't turn their lives around. They continued to utilize drugs. So some of them are dead now from overdoses and from similar poor decision making. So it's a blessing to be one of the folks that actually utilized the program, took advantage of it, and decided to make something of himself. I know a few others out there that occasionally have contact with. It's very rare, but it's something that was necessary for me. If I hadn't done it, I would have ended up on the streets or in jail or dead. So there really wasn't an option.
You mentioned and you said the phrase rock bottom, hitting rock bottom.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me how dramatic personal change seems to need that type of a situation. I mean, when we hit rock bottom at a certain stage in life, and it sounds like you really hit one, but it seems to be a really interesting catalyst. I mean, I've talked to others about that, the rock bottom phenomenon. Sometimes it just takes that before we can actually turn things around. What when you got up there, did you want to go? Were you defiant about going? Did they have to deliver you there and get you locked in? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, I chose to go voluntarily. I was actually in an inpatient behavioral health facility when I decided to go. My parents brought the idea to me. They basically sold it to me as a lie. They told me it was like a summer camp I was going to go to. Didn't realize I was going to be living in the middle of the woods underneath a tarp for 2 months, making fire.
Literally underneath the tarp?
Yeah, I mean, we had a tarp, we had a sleeping bag. We didn't have items to start a fire. We actually had to learn to make fire with a bow drill. That was one of the things that we did, and there were other methods as well that I didn't master any of those, but I did master the bow drill. We had to hike quite a lot. We had at one point for half the program, the first month, we actually pushed Mormon hand carts with all of our gear in it. It was this small group of young men out there that were in similar situation, and we had therapy repeatedly, like once a week with licensed therapists. And we had counselors with us, two adult counselors that would be there, for the week at a time, and they would swap out with other folks at the end of the week. And we hiked a lot. We exercised. I lost 20 pounds from hiking 156 miles, pushing this giant hand cart. It's like 500 pounds empty. You load it up with your gear, it's 1,000 pounds. And of course, I was the biggest guy in the group because I was, conditioned for football at the time. I was 195, 200 pounds as a 17-year-old. And I was basically the one stuck pushing this stupid cart up these hills. And it's not easy to push these things. They're big, wooden structures. They have wooden wheels with a metal exterior around the wheel. And you basically, if you hit a rock, you have to go to the side of the actual cart and drag the spoke over the rock to keep it going. And it's a very arduous task. So definitely was an interesting experience being out there. And that's really when I realized that my life was, not in a good spot. My sister had gone off to school. Her school was paid for, her college. My brother, the same thing. I blew all my college money on, these programs so that I could turn my life around. And I had to figure it out on my own. And I graduated obviously debt-free, working my way through undergrad, and then same thing through law school.
So how long were you out there?
I was out there for 2 months.
And was there a particular moment that stands out as sort of the defining moment?
It was monsoon season there when I was out there, and we were at 10,000 feet of elevation there because we were up in the mountains in southern Utah where the program was. And I remember being in a few lightning storms, and just how scary it was to be at that elevation and being outside without any shelter. And I really knew at that moment in time, it's like, I don't want to live on the streets. I don't want to live outside. That would suck because this is terrifying. I remember seeing a lightning strike pretty, relatively close to me when I was in my shelter on a solo part of the program where they would basically separate us out, quarter mile a pop for each student. And you have to be out there for a couple of days on your own to kind of think about your life. And that was the most terrifying experience of my life. And I really remember, basically figuring out that if I didn't turn my life around, I was going to have to live outside. And this is not the place for me. So.
Yeah. So any instructors or counselors during that experience that stand out?
Yeah, there was this individual, we called him Staff Zach. That was his name. I don't know why we called him that, but he was a part of staff and his name is Zach. And he was a pretty cool guy from California, and he was honest. And that's really what it took. I mean, he would call people out when he knew that they were misleading him. And, if you were trying to BS that guy, he wasn't going to let you have it. He'd question you to the core and get to the underlying root of what it was that you were actually having an issue with and cause you to confront that. So I appreciated him.
Interesting. So you graduate from there. What was your next move?
So I did not take any of the ACT or the other college admissions tests because I skipped those tests to get high. So I had to go to community college. And I moved back in with my parents in Scottsdale and went to Scottsdale Community College for a year. I started working pretty quickly for a number of different companies. Ended up being a valet, parking cars for money. It actually was a great job. I parked the Phoenix Suns coaches, players, and owners' cars during the home games. Worked at a couple cool bars in Scottsdale, made a bunch of money and cash tips, and had a good time. And then I met my wife shortly after that when I returned, and immediately fell in love with her. And
Well, how did that happen? How'd you meet her?
it was at my cousin's baptism. I didn't want to go. I was actually dating someone else at the time that I met my wife, and I was hungover in the morning and 19 years old, having fun with my friends the night before. And my mom, kicked me in the morning, told me to get out of bed. We're going to this church event. I didn't want to go, and she dragged me there. And I ended up seeing her when I walked into the room, and I thought, "Oh God, please don't be related to me," because she was so beautiful. And I ended up talking to her at the party afterwards, and I got invited over to her home that night. She'd actually been in my uncle's class as a student when she was in elementary school. He was a teacher here locally, and she babysat for my cousins. And I never met her before that, but I think my uncle kind of set us up. So I ended up staying at her home with her and her family, talking, playing games that night after the event, and stayed there till like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. I had class the next day at 7 a.m. And I just remember leaving and texting my uncle and saying, "I'm going to marry this girl." And I'd never looked back. So I ended up breaking up with the girl that I was with, right before that, about a day or two later. And yeah, I chased her down to Tucson because she was going to school down there. And I went to the community college down there for a couple of years. And then we got married while we were in Tucson and moved back up to Scottsdale for her job. And then went to work after I graduated from Arizona State University for a tech startup for a year doing cold calling, which I absolutely hated, but I got pretty good at the end. That was a recommendation from some people that I knew that were very successful business folks here in Scottsdale. I worked at this super exclusive golf club when I was at Arizona State University, just working outside, cleaning clubs, hanging out with people. It's called Whisper Rock. And there are a whole bunch of like Fortune 500 CEOs there, really successful business people. And I asked a bunch of them, like, "Hey, if you're 23 years old and you're clueless, what would you do for a living?" And I got the same answer over and over again. It's like, you need to learn to cold call. That's how you become a successful person in life, is you learn to cold call. And so I went and did that per their recommendation. I hated it. And while I was there, I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I studied for the LSAT, and I got into Regent University School of Law, and I got a near full ride scholarship to go there. And I took it, and we moved across the country.
How did that happen? That you got a full ride to Regent?
So I did pretty well on the test to get into law school, the LSAT, and also because of my work experience, my non college related activities outside of the scholastic world. They took that into account. They saw that I was someone who was motivated, someone who actually had the capacity to succeed. I did pretty well at Arizona State University as a student, so I had good grades, and my ideals, being a Christian, aligned with that school's ideology, and so it was a good fit. And I loved going to law school. A lot of people hate law school. It was like the best time of my life. It's like a Navy SEAL camp for the brain. You basically have to go suffer through it in order to succeed. And I like to work hard. I think the one thing that I have that a lot of people don't have is grit. And it separates me because I'm willing to do the extra work and go the extra mile in my cases. And my obsessiveness in some respects is really an asset with respect to the practice of law.
Wow. So, who did you meet at Regents? Anybody that's still a friend? Any professors that stood out or made a particular impression on you?
Yeah, I had a wonderful time at Regent. I still talk to my best friends are from Regent, really, my buddy. I won't name names here because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. And I know that I'm a controversial figure, so trying to be vague as I can be. But yeah, I was class president while I was there. I was president of the Business Law Society. I had, my first daughter my second year, and I had some really wonderful professors. Actually, Justice Samuel Alito of the U.S. Supreme Court was one of my professors.
Wow. Tremendous. So, I'm going to back up for a second because I'm really interested, and I think our listeners are too, in that moment, that particular moment. Maybe you're at ASU. So you went Scottsdale. Did you go to Pima Community College?
Yeah, I went to Scottsdale Community College and then Pima for 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. And then transferred in to ASU.
Yeah.
So what was that defining moment or thought process where you decided, hey, you know what? I think I want to go to law school. What caused that? Where did
I
that
had
come from?
a professor. I mean, she's a little bit liberal, I would say now, but in retrospect, but her name is Professor Herbert. She was a professor in the School of business law at ASU. That was my undergrad, was business with a focus in law. I got into that because I didn't take the ACT or the SAT, those standardized tests. If you want to get into a Bachelor of Science degree at ASU, you actually have to take one of those standardized tests to be a part of that program. Because I hadn't done that, basically God stuck me into the business law as a default for, and I wanted to be a supply chain major, or finance, or something like that. And I ended up getting stuck in the business law, and I loved it. There was this class on the rule of law in particular, and the concept of how our society is governed by this set of written principles that must be clearly spelled out for the individuals that they're governing, so that we can structure our lives and actually make decisions that are going to be beneficial to our interests without the fear of being reprimanded for our decisions, because we know what the rules are. And so that concept kind of stuck with me. There was this book by a professor from New York University named Jeremy Walden that I still remember reading passages from about the rule of law and the importance of that concept. And frankly, when COVID happened, the rule of law went out the window. And
Yeah,
that's really what motivated me as an individual to say, no, we have constitutional rights, and I'm not willing to let this stability in our society just completely fall apart because some people think it's convenient or in the greater good's interest to have these new rules that govern our lives that weren't written anywhere, and they violate the fundamental norms established by the Constitution. So yeah, I had a
so
weird.
this professor or instructor at Arizona State, she said something or had a discussion with you that she suggested maybe that you should consider law?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was my willingness to participate in the class. Again, going back to the football, my capacity to fight people like on the field and just have that aggressive sort of confrontational nature in my being. It was a really fun class to be a part of because I got to argue with people, and I like arguing with people. I think it's fun. And that was part of what we were doing in the business law program. And so, being in there, standing up, taking a position, defending the position, I thought that was just a blast. And so that really motivated me to kind of pursue this career as being an attorney. It's just been wonderful.
Wow. Okay, so that's where it came from. So then, while you're in law school, did you have any thoughts about the type of law? Were you thinking business law, or
Yeah,
what were you
initially
thinking then?
that was the goal, business law. I wanted to be, a contract attorney initially. I thought that would be kind of fun. Then I took contracts class and I threw that out the window because that was terrible. Sitting at a desk all day, pushing papers across and doing nothing else. It's not my cup of tea. So I really liked the constitutional classes. I did a couple of really fun internships in law school. I worked as a criminal defense, attorney's firm for a summer. I spent some time in chambers working for a judge. I really liked that, writing for a judge and actually considering all these really fascinating issues with like maritime law, constitutional issues. It was very interesting. But I ended up not getting a job while I was in law school. I ended up taking the bar, moving back to Arizona with my wife and my family to take the bar here. And I got a job right after the bar. I got recruited by a firm out of California, and I ended up I was basically taking over their office in Arizona for workers'
And what
compensation.
did they specialize in?
It was workers' comp defense.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Didn't really do much litigating though. That first year out of law school, basically, it was me helping to build the business for them. I did a lot of playing golf and a lot of networking, using my sales background to try to develop those relationships. And then I graduated during 2020 in the height of COVID and took the bar in a mask. So I had a year after that working for this firm out of California, taking over their Arizona office. And then my sister in July of 2021, she was a nurse at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and she got threatened with termination because she was unvaccinated. And so in my free time, and starting in late July, early August, I started writing letters on her behalf to the CEO and to the board of trustees for Phoenix Children's Hospital, and essentially just threatening to sue the hell out of them over and over again because she had certain contractual rights in Arizona that were implied in fact in her contract and recognized by law. And if they fired her, I was going to sue them and sue them all personally. I put them on notice of the illegal breach of contract theory, and she ended up getting a letter a day after she was supposed to get fired. It was early October of 2021, saying that she could keep her job. She didn't ask for an exemption; she demanded it. And I knew at that moment, after being a practitioner for less than a year, I got licensed in November 2020, and this was October of 2021. That I had just taken down a $500+ million a year revenue generating entity by myself, and I could do something as an attorney. So I told my wife, who was 7 months pregnant with our second baby at the time, that I was going to quit my job and start a nonprofit, and that's how the Gavel Project was born.
That is phenomenal. I mean, it usually obviously takes people years to sort of flounder around in a career or a specialty, and then finally get their bearings, and then figure out that they can make a difference. That is amazing that you you did that just a year out of law school. Crazy. So, and that was over the mask mandate or the vax?
That was the vax mandate. They were basically telling her she had to get a vaccine, and they were not offering her any additional consideration, in exchange for her permanently modifying her body, and that just threw me over the edge.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's something that I want to discuss with you too. And we're going to get there. We definitely saw a shredding of the Bill of Rights, if not just an outright trampling, and even forgetting about the Bill of Rights, all over an invisible attacker.
yeah.
I've seen plenty of memes. I like memes, and I've seen plenty of memes of the founding fathers standing around, I guess, in Philadelphia, and they're around a desk, and it's obvious that they're working on the Declaration of Independence and some other pronouncements, and they make fun of these are our Bill of Rights, unless someday there is a pandemic, and then it doesn't count. All of it goes out the window. Well, of course, it's the ridiculousness of that is evident in the meme, and that's the purpose of the meme, to point out how ridiculous that idea is.
It's like they hadn't considered the Black Plague or anything before that,
Right. So, so you spent 1 year working for the comp firm, basically building their business, getting it going, but then moonlighting, as it were, writing these letters, and then having that success. So then you went home and, or not went home, but maybe just, you must have had a conversation with your wife and said, hey, I think I've just discovered what I want to do, or that I can really make a difference, and I need to maybe step out of where I'm at and just focus on going after these types of situations. Talk about that conversation.
Yeah, so there's just a touch more to that story. There was obviously the vaccine mandate was coming down at that time, the OSHA mandate for all of these employees across the country, hundreds of millions of people that were being subjected to this, experimental medication based on the dictate by some government agency in Washington, D.C. that, for a product that really was neither safe nor effective. And we knew that from the outset, and it couldn't have been, because it's not possible to have a new product without any length of time showing its safety or effectiveness, to give it that denotation. So I was kind of being driven crazy by the whole situation, and I was writing a lot in my free time, trying to come up with arguments to help people. I came up with this argument actually that relates to what I did with the Gavel Project. But in essence, you have a right as an individual. And I took this from my learning at Regent, my time with Justice Alito, et cetera. The constitutional focus is really what we do at Regent. It's the best law school in the country. Harvard's got nothing on us. Yale's got nothing on us. We take students that get a 156, 157 on their LSAT and turn them into people that pass the bar at a 97, 98% rate. So you get gems at University of Virginia, and you turn out people that pass the bar at a high rate, and we get less than gems, and we do the same thing. So we really have a quality education there. But I came up with this argument, and I got it in front of a bunch of attorney generals from different states, a bunch of nonprofit organizations. And the argument was that you as an individual have a limitless right to remove a mask or refuse a vaccine exemption or mandate, excuse me, under the principle of the First Amendment, the free speech, expressive conduct principle. And what that principle says is basically your right to free speech is not limited to just your words. It actually protects your conduct. When your conduct is sufficiently expressive for a person who's watching what you're doing to understand the meaning of your actions, then that is also protected speech. It's why you can take an American flag and go to a park anywhere in the United States and burn it and not get arrested. It's why you can, take these actions in certain circumstances and demonstrate to people the meaning of what it is that you're doing and have that be protected conduct. And in my mind, it was very clear that because of the vaccine mandate, any business or any person that was refusing to comply with that mandate, the act of refusal of itself under the circumstances was sufficient to convey to a reasonable observer that that person was sending a clear message, one of protest, one of free speech. And the case law is extremely strong on this point. It's, there are so many cases going back to students refusing to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance back in the 1940s. To flag burning cases, to all sorts of other cases, modifying the flag, hanging it in your window, where as long as anyone watching your conduct would understand the meaning of that conduct, that is expressive and is protected. And so all these different organizations, the attorney generals that I talked to, they didn't want to do anything. They were basically complicit, in my mind, with the mandates. They didn't want to take a stand and actually do what was necessary to push back. And so when Gavin Newsom, this was early October, decided that he was going to stick needles in kids' arms as a condition of going and getting a public education in society, which really is the baseline. If you want to be a successful person at all or be a human being, even in the United States, you have to get a high school diploma. It's inarguable. If you don't have a high school diploma, you're basically worthless. And for him to say, I'm going to permanently modify the bodies of all students in California just so they can be a citizen, a basic citizen, it really broke the last straw for me. And so that was when I knew I had to do something. So I started the Gavel Project. I started writing, trying to help in different cases. But really what I did that I thought was the most effective is I decided to lead free speech protests. So I've been starting in January of 2022. My wife and I had liquidated one of our family vehicles to fund the nonprofit, and we had dipped into our savings account so that I could fly around California and teach families and children how to civilly disobey their school's COVID-19 mask mandates and actually set up lawsuits to sue these teachers and principals, all personally, under Title 42, Section 1983 for civil rights violations. And that's what I did. I went from Coronado Island up to Sacramento, and I led kids across the state in these free speech protests. I taught kids how to politely remove their masks. I would, sit outside high schools, and there would be police there, there'd be sheriffs there, there would be the principals and the parents, and I would negotiate between all of the parties saying, look, I'm that kid's attorney. He has a right to go to school free of harassment and discrimination. Here are the reasons why. And if you preclude him from going to school, I'm going to sue you personally. And in some instances, it actually worked. In Natomas, California, we had kids that got to go back to class weeks before the mask mandate lifted in March because they decided to protest and threaten litigation. We had other cases that, it didn't work so well, and we're now suing. for those students to vindicate their rights. And that's in Coronado Unified School District. That's in Saddleback Valley Unified School District. And that's an ABC Unified School District in Los Angeles.
Wow. 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 Yeah. This is, while we seem to be looking at COVID in the rear view mirror, I think that a lot of people believe that we're probably not that far from some sort of a recurrence. And it's, I know that some people might say while they're listening to this, well, hey, this is old news. We're past that. It's all over with. And we certainly don't want to go through that again, and we're going to do our best to avoid it. But I think that the one way that you avoid it is that you don't forget what happened, what they did, and what a violation it was, and also that that we talk about the facts, and the facts around masking from the very beginning were, in my opinion, incontrovertible. And I will start off with the basis for that being Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci's statement in January, I think on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, in 2020.
Yeah, 2020, that they were of no use. Of course, since then there's been the big meta study of what 62.
The Cochrane analysis, correct?
Yes, the Cochrane, and of course that's an interesting topic all in itself, because Cochrane evidently got quite a bit of heat, and either modified or did they even retract that? I'm not even sure now, but we still talk about the analysis because Cochrane has always been held up as the gold standard at whenever they were doing an analysis like that. On my part, when that situation was coming around, I had I knew through some of the cases that I dealt with that I had read about OSHA coming up with guidelines on masking. And so there in the first part of 2020, when this was all happening, I went online and found it. And yes, there was an OSHA study. It got pulled, but it went back. I think it was posted in 2003, I believe. It was like 20 years prior, but OSHA had identified the harms from continuous masking and had laid out to employers how much of a fresh air timeout that they had to give employees to prevent the employees from having brain damage or other deleterious effects. It was just really interesting to me how all that got thrown out the window, and of course, the other part that we went through was it seemed like by late May we had data from the CDC that showed which age groups were at risk, and clearly the kids were not.
Right.
And also clearly we knew that our oldest citizens were, and yet our public health officials did not modify their stance. And in fact, when the three signers of the Barrington Declaration, three prominent, world-renowned physicians, came out not against the vaccine, not against even masking, I don't think. It was really about the lockdown. Yeah. They came out against the lockdown and especially identified what they thought the harms it would do to our kids. And to see them smeared and castigated the way they were was astounding. It was an astounding situation to go through. I
finished law school in my garage. I got my graduation canceled. The thing that I was looking forward to most in my life, up until that point, besides my wedding, obviously, and the beautiful birth of my child and all that. Before that, I was supposed to speak at the law school graduation. I've been planning this. I had done, so much work as class president to get everything in line for this huge event. And, there were other events that we had put on as well through the Student Bar Association. And when this happened, And I started looking at the data very early on because I, finished law school in my garage in Virginia, of course, because the school was closed. There was nowhere else to go. We had a, young family in a small home, and that was the only place for me to go. I got infuriated. I still like to joke with my wife that I'm only doing all this because I'm still pissed off at Anthony Fauci for canceling my law school graduation. Um, but it's like we knew so early on, as you said, that young people weren't at risk. I was 27, I think 27 years old at the time, 28 maybe, when COVID happened. And looking at the data, people in my age group, especially those without pre-existing conditions like myself, were not at risk for any harm from contracting the virus. And so for the schools to be shut down, for my daughter, as I think she was 1.5, 2 years old at the time, to be told that she can't go to preschool and interact with her friends. We can't bring her to a park in our neighborhood because that was somehow dangerous. It kind of threw me through a loop. And I kind of sat back as I got my job and did what was necessary for the first year, thinking that I was going to be this attorney and take on this work at this workers' compensation defense firm. But I was in a rare position as someone who graduated debt-free from law school to be able to take a risk and do something unique. And I ended up I still work pro bono for the nonprofit. I don't get compensated for my time. I've put in thousands of hours. I spent 2 years working for the nonprofit pro bono without any other form of compensation before I started my for-profit firm, Heath Law. And I probably have the record in Arizona for the most pro bono hours worked out of any attorney, and I'm just 31 years old. So I did it because I felt I had to.
Yeah. So when you formed the Gavel Project, you formed it as a 503 503c3 tax exempt.
Correct. So we're a 501c3 public charity. That's what we are.
And why? Why did you do it that way? Isn't it kind of unusual to form a law firm that way?
It is, yes. So I did it that way, partly out of ignorance and partly because I believed it was necessary. And I still believe this point to be true. It was necessary as someone who was such a young attorney at the time. I'd been practicing for less than a year when we formed the nonprofit. In order to get people's trust to take on these cases, I had to literally offer to assume the risk and assume the cost of litigation entirely. Even a contingency fee for someone in my position, without any litigation experience really prior to that, a couple cases in law school, a couple cases while I was an attorney. In order to take on a contingency fee, those types of cases, it's like you have to convince the people that you're the best attorney for the job. And it was so much easier for me to do it as a nonprofit, and especially with these families out in California. I'm talking to most of these parents are older than I am. They're in their later 30s or in their 40s. They're talking to a 29-year-old kid who's basically saying, "Hey, don't listen to the school's mask mandate. Tell your kid to go back to class. Say no, thank you, because we're going to sue them." And that really was the only way, in my view, to convince people and build up my reputation, build that notoriety as a serious person, and it worked well. Obviously, it's cost my family a lot of money. We've been giving a ton of money to the public charity to keep things afloat. We are the predominant funders of it. Luckily, my wife has a great job and we're able to do that. But, it has been a very big hardship on my family. I just got a new car a few months ago. I didn't have a car for 2 years, almost 2.5, 3 years, because of the nonprofit, because we gave it away so we could fund the litigation costs. So yeah, we made a lot of really big sacrifices, and I would do it again in a heartbeat because it was necessary. But now I'm very, very blessed based on that risk that we took. I have my own firm, my own office. I have multiple attorneys working for me in my private practice. I have amazing cases that I represent people running for United States Congress. I represent professional athletes now. Like, there are very few people at my age and my position that can say, that's their pedigree. And it's because of what I did for the Gavel Project. So I would do it again in a heartbeat.
So you've got the Gavel Project, the nonprofit law firm, and then you also have you have a for-profit side, Heath Law.
We do. Yeah, Heath Law PLLC. And really, we started that at a necessity. I didn't really want to start a for-profit, but after working for 2 years without a paycheck and giving all of my time away for free, we needed to make ends meet in my family. And so I started a for-profit. I took on a case for Jody O'Malley, who is a Project Veritas whistleblower here in Arizona. I'm litigating on her behalf in a defamation case. And then I got into election lawsuits. And that's really my primary focus right now is election litigation in Arizona.
Wow, man, that's another hot topic that the country's still massively to fight it over. Have you taken on any personal injury, medical malpractice cases related to or not COVID?
Yeah, so we have sued. My for-profit firm has sued both Mayo Clinic and Banner Health for wrongful death, medical malpractice, and a number of personal torts as well in Arizona.
Wow. And is that over the treatment protocol, I had a friend down there that went through it and died at Sanpan. They put him on the ventilator and then on remdesivir and unplugged him after about 60 days and said, sorry, he left us. Is it the same protocol?
Correct. So we have one of the cases, the Mayo Clinic case, is really more of a wrongful death case related to the overuse of opioids. Our client was given 16 doses of morphine on his last day of life for no apparent reason. This is an amazing case, actually. If you read the complaint, our client, Betsy, she was actually received a FaceTime call from a nurse at the hospital, and she watched her husband die while they dosed him with morphine. He went from being, somewhat normal at the beginning of the call to being completely, belligerent by the end of the call, having his head swell. And she was, of course, sick with COVID at the time too, so there was nothing she could do about it. It's a really shocking case. We're suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress in that case as well, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and a number of other torts.
You mean the FaceTime call was just to rub it in? I mean,
I'm not going to say why the FaceTime call was placed, but it was placed, and she literally,
Wow.
watched as they dosed her husband with morphine repeatedly, which is quite egregious. And we have, the evidence is strong in that case. Let's just say that. And then we have another case against Banner Health for another client, Sherry, who had her husband taken away from her due to the treatment protocols there, utilizing different drugs that were, purportedly under the protection of the PrEP Act that we're going to be litigating that issue. I'm very certain of in that case. And just dereliction of their duties as providers. I mean, they were suing for false imprisonment in that case. They literally strapped this guy to a bed. He was a veteran. He, many years in the military, many years in the police force, had pre-existing kidney issues, expressly rejected the idea of taking remdesivir, told him he didn't want it. His wife told him the same thing, and they gave it to him anyway. He had kidney issues. It's on the black box. You don't do that.
wow.
He had issues when he died, like certain conditions that you really only get in third world countries, the types of things that he saw while he was in Iraq in the Air Force. Who in the United States dies of gangrene? What?
Yeah.
Like that's something that should not happen in treatment facilities in the United States. This is a first world country, and that's what we're dealing with in these cases. So yeah, we're handling those cases, and we're hoping for positive.
So that
outcome.
first case, Ryan, I mean, it's a little different because of the opioid angle.
Yeah.
What did you say? 16 injections?
16 injections of morphine in one day.
In one day. And then this second case, it sounds like if they were restraining him, was he trying to get up and leave the hospital, or
they wouldn't let him ambulate. No, they're really, the thing is that's amazing about that case is there's no real notation in his medical records as to why he was strapped down to the bed.
Wow.
Which is something you're supposed to do by their protocol. If you're going to restrain someone, you typically have to explain why you're restraining them in your medical records, and it's just absent. So it's a very interesting case.
So the situation I'm thinking of with my friend, 68-year-old man, he didn't have, as far as I know, he didn't have any of those issues. I don't know that he was strapped down. He got checked in and went from a cannula of oxygen supplementation because his saturation levels were below 90, right? Which is an issue. And in fact, I think his even might have dropped lower for a time being. But then they decided, and this is the protocol that I think a lot of people are interested in, whether litigation is going to sort of expose that main protocol and open up an entire will open up, hundreds of thousands of cases, we think. And that is, people went in and they started off with supplementation, but then they end up they're told that they need to go on the ventilator.
Yeah.
And then they're given remdesivir without, I think the investigation would show without fully informed consent. Right.
Well, I mean, you start drugging people early on. You give them more than their first day they come in, which is typically what happens in these situations. And there is no informed consent after that moment in time, in my professional opinion. When you drug someone, you can't give them the capacity to fully consider the ramifications of what it is they're deciding with respect to experimental medical treatments. And that's what they were doing in these cases, and that's what they claimed they had consent to do. Because why? You had some sort of boilerplate bullcrap, paper that you sign when you walked in the hospital that would prevent you from being treated at all if you didn't sign it, and you wouldn't be able to get treatment. So, there is some unconscionability to that those types of boilerplate agreements that I think prevent them from being binding, and as well as the fact that, in my view, the PrEP Act, which they're claiming to have immunity for the certain treatments like the ventilators, like the remdesivir, it's not constitutional. The takings clause of the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says that if the government is going to take your property from you, they have to provide you just compensation for that property. And you, as an individual, your body, per the U.S. Constitution, is property. It's your property. The 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says that you cannot sell people as chattel property. That's an express recognition that people are or have been historically chattel property. Their bodies are their property, and you can't belong to anyone else. And so by injuring people and by taking their lives away using this experimental use authorization, PrEP Act coverage, you are literally depriving people of property without due process of law, and you're not compensating them for that. So therefore, there's a very strong argument to be made. No one's really litigated this issue fully. It's been raised before in other cases. I'm very pleased to say that some of the more brilliant speakers at the COVID litigation conference had also mentioned using this in California, but it wasn't decided on these issues. They used constructive fraud, and that's how they got around the PrEP Act as well, and that's how they decided the cases. But this argument is very sound. It's completely logical, and I think that this is one the Supreme Court one day will consider based on the cases that we're litigating now.
Man, that's fantastic. Yeah, I know the presentation you're talking about, and the constructive fraud strategy, along with there were some others that they talked about that they'd had some success with that were sure novel. What eye opener. It feels like, and I said this at the beginning of my presentation, that these narratives are definitely crumbling. And I think more and more people are waking up. And it may be as simple as the realization that COVID is still supposedly here. Look at what's happened. It's nowhere near the level of fear. If COVID's still around and people are still getting COVID, I mean, we've had reports in the last 2 weeks of people in our circle that have had a positive test and have had to quarantine themselves. So if it's still around, how come we're not wearing masks? How come we're not 6 feet apart? How come we're not restricted from 5 or less at our St. Patty's Day party coming up? It's all disappeared because it wasn't real to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, the disease is certainly an issue. I mean, it is something that does damage to the body. You're talking about a disease that codes for a spike protein, tricks your cells into coding for this cytotoxic spike protein that kills cells on impact. But the thing about it is, diseases happen. That's part of being a human being. It's part of being alive. We have to deal with these types of issues, just but by the nature of our existence, and it's been going on since the beginning of time. And what's the most egregious thing about COVID, and aside from the made up things that were intended to protect us, like masks and distancing. I mean, distancing was, Anthony Fauci's even admitted, like, they made that up.
Wait a minute.
Didn't make sense.
And when I say,
Masking.
I want to explain, when I say that it wasn't real, that's what I'm referring to. Not that the
Oh yeah.
virus wasn't real, but all of this other stuff wasn't real. And many doctors and experts pushed back immediately against these pronouncements and mandates, saying, no. I mean, that's not how this COVID gets transmitted. You don't need 6 feet. You don't need a mask.
You
So
washing your hands is fine and dandy to prevent diseases, but it doesn't have anything to do with an airborne virus like COVID.
that's right.
It was all illogical, and it was, in my view, intended to stoke as much fear as possible in order to get compliance with the vaccine mandate. And that was their objective. They wanted to profit as much as possible from this experimental drug that there was purportedly no liability for, and that's what they did. The big pharma companies like Pfizer and like Moderna, they fabricated their evidence for safety and effectiveness. The studies in particular, I mean, they said they were 100% effective, and that's because 2 people without the vaccine died, and 1 person with the vaccine died, and therefore using statistical games, they say, well, it's 100% effective because 2 to 1 is 100%, and it's one of the most disgusting things that we've ever had in the history of the world, in my view. This mass psychosis that people fell into because they were terrified of something they couldn't see, and something they couldn't interact with. And they didn't understand, what was going on. But I think what really opened my eyes to all of this, and I want to give credit where credit is due, Steve Kirsch. He went on the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein and Robert Malone back in July of 2021. And I took away very difficult conversation to listen to because Steve is such, an aggressive person, and he was really, talking over Robert. Robert was trying to use his very soft-spoken Southern, accent voice to get his points across, and he couldn't land them here and there. But the thing that really came out to me was that the vaccine that they developed was based upon the virus itself. It was very similar to natural immunity. You could get it again if you actually were vaccinated. It didn't prevent the spread of COVID-19 to even after vaccination. And 2, the way that the product actually works is it tricks your cells into coding for the cytotoxic spike protein that COVID generates. So meaning that when you're putting this thing in your body, you are literally tricking your cells into creating these little spikes that travel through your bloodstream and then kill every cell they come into contact with. And I'm like, I'm not putting that crap in my body. This doesn't make any sense. It just drove me nuts.
Yeah, I don't know if you were there when I did my presentation, but I referenced Steve.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
He got Malone. I think they flew up here to Portland where Brett had moved and was putting together was doing the Dark Horse podcast, and I know that they broke it. My remembrance is they broke it into 3 pieces, and each one of the pieces is like 15 minutes roughly. And the first one, boy, Malone, you can tell, is really getting upset with Kirsch because Kirsch is so passionate, and he's got such a facility with the facts, and he's just so eager to get everything out. And I saw Malone be a little bit short-tempered and asked him if he would kind of cool it, is what I remember.
Yeah.
But I got to say, that seeing that on YouTube and parts 2 and 3, watching it with my wife, sending it to anybody that, our friends and relatives, and saying, hey, you got to watch this. I mean, here's the doctor that holds the first 8 or 9 patents in mRNA, had nothing to do with the vaccine, but he's now analyzed the data that Steve Kirsch has pulled from the Japanese equivalent of our FDA, I think, where they were talking about how the Japanese had been tracking the spike protein and how it had cleaved from the deltoid, from the shoulder, and it was all over the body and past the brain-blood barrier. It was ending up in heavy concentrations in the ovaries and the testes, which was highly concerning. And I remember Malone being very concerned about that. And I don't remember, I don't think it was the first segment, but it might have been the second or third where he talked about contacting the people he knew at FDA and asking them, you know, and pleading with them to at least remove the vaccine recommendation from pregnant women until we could figure out what was going on, and telling them there was something wrong, and then being met with stone silence. That was an amazing epiphany. But, you know, a guy like Steve Kirsch to go all in like he's gone, and to be so indefatigable. I mean, the guy is tireless and he is so prodigious in his output. I have seen, because I'm on his Substack, I mean, the guy will post 6-8 times a day, and it's detailed research and information many times. So with a guy like that, who is not going to back down and not going to quit, it what it means to me is that it's why I got involved in the movement, went to CLC1. I just thought, man, I've got to be there. If this guy is putting this on, then we are going to, we're going to win, and the truth's going to come out. And people who were hurt by this because of this just naked money grab, which I think is unfortunately a lot of it. There may be some other elements going on too, but definitely the money that was made by Fauci and others, Gates, and some of the stock trades that he did in and out of various, BioNTech and some of the others. It's just, it'll be interesting to see the history and how it's written, and what happens to these people. I believe with your help and the attorneys that we all met at CLC 1 and 2, that we're going to see justice. We're going to see the truth be brought out, and people are going to learn what happened. And I don't think they're going to be too happy. It could spell a hard time for medicine and trusting doctors, especially trusting our public health system, because they clearly let us down. So talk about real quick here. We've got a few minutes left, I think, but talk about some of the other things on your mind with regard to this subject, and where you see things heading.
Yeah, so I want to draw some connections to, the mission of the Gavel Project and sort of how COVID interacts with that. Because I think when a lot of people consider COVID-19, they don't necessarily think of wokeness. And we're an anti-woke 501c3 nonprofit. That's what we do, is we battle wokeness. But it really is a woke ideology. So the way that I define wokeness is that it is utilizing a faith-based system to promote some ambiguous greater good. And it benefits certain people, and it is detrimental to individual liberty. Okay. The same thing is true with the LGBTQ plus movement, where you have individuals that are for the purpose of the greater good, being, inclusion and making sure that everyone's feelings aren't hurt, even though these people, in a lot of respects, many of them, not all of them, are mentally ill. They are telling boys that they can become girls at a very young age and vice versa. And they are encouraging those children to make permanent decisions that end up impacting them for the rest of their life, like puberty blockers or surgical transition, et cetera. The same thing is true with the vaccine. You're promoting some sort of faith-based ideology, being the greater good, the health of human beings. You need to take this to save your grandma, even though we knew it didn't prevent the spread at all. It's a faith-based ideology that is detrimental to the health of the young people and the freedoms of young people. And at the end of the day, creates lifetime customers for the pharmaceutical industrial complex in the same way that the LGBTQ plus movement does. And so that's why we're fighting this particular issue when it comes to the COVID mandates. And it relates to, all sorts of other woke ideologies that are the same. It's communism that we're fighting. It's the promotion of the state as one entity that has absolute control over our lives as individuals, and it negates individual freedom. So that is a point that I want to make sure that I put out there. As well as I want to touch on my work as an election attorney. So the way,
before you go to that,
yeah,
um, the I guess that maybe I've been thinking of this a slightly differently, and that is that it seemed like there was maybe a subgroup in LGBTQ of transgenderists, we'll call them.
yeah,
I made note of the Gays Against Groomers,
right,
and I think some of them have been very vocal coming out against this, this movement of allowing 5 to 10-year-olds to change their sex with puberty blockers and surgery and everything else that's involved. So I guess I think that maybe there's some sort of a distinction there, because it seems to me that I have heard a lot of members of that community rail against these issues.
yeah.
Okay, so but this the transgender faction is definitely disturbing. Definitely disturbing.
I know some of the folks over at Gays Against Groomers, some of the leaders there, and I can tell you that they're wonderful people. It's a great organization, and it really highlights that this is not about equal rights under law. These people, gay folks in particular in the United States, have had equal rights under law for many, many, many years. They can get married, they can have the same tax benefits, they can adopt children, they can do all of these things that heterosexual couples can do as well. This is about creating special privileges for folks that are part of a victim class. And it's to oppress the rights of the rest of us so that we have to do what they say for fear of being reprimanded, either through actual punishment, with respect to your workplace, with respect to your position as a student in school, or social ostracization, which is equally devastating, especially to children. And that's why these types of ideologies need to be fought at the root level in the elementary schools, in the middle schools, and in the high schools. Because when I was going around speaking at these school board meetings, these county board of supervisor meetings, when I was teaching kids how to disobey their mask mandates in California, I noticed a pattern. It was the same people that were speaking out for the COVID-19 mandates that were also speaking out for transing the kids. And that's because it promotes the folks that are basically financing them. These nonprofit organizations, these women's rights groups that, back in the day that were founded by feminists, are now going around saying that men can become women. And that's the, most misogynistic thing ever. It destroys the idea of feminism. And that's because these organizations, their donors, have captured them. The organizations giving to the nonprofits have captured the nonprofits, and they know that if the funding gets cut off from their primary donors, these feminist groups, then they're screwed. Their jobs are gone. And so they'll do whatever their donors say. It's really a tragedy, because as a father of 2 girls, I believe in equality. I believe that my daughter should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do, and they should be successful as they want to.
Right.
But it's not equality.
Right. So, yeah, it's amazing, the connection between all of this, isn't it? I mean, it even goes into the political situation and what we're finding ourselves up against with regard to our election issues.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. And the elections are literally the most important thing, most important topic for anyone to be thinking about at all times at this point. If we don't realize right now that our elections are the only chance we get as citizens to put people in power who decide where to point the guns, then we're in big trouble. I mean, people need to realize that fundamentally the government is nothing more than an entity. It is a gang, it is a criminal gang, in my view, that happens to be the folks that are in control of the monopoly on violence. That's what they are. And our elections are our only chance that we have as individual citizens to control who gets into power and who gets to direct that gang. And so I got into election litigation at the recommendation of a friend, Warner Mendenhall, who's another attorney out of Ohio, very talented attorney. I think he recognized that I have the capacity to do, special things, and he recommended I get into election litigation. And long story short, I ended up suing Kerry Lake's judge in the Arizona Supreme Court as a pro se litigant for writ of mandamus back in January of 2023 because he overlooked binding precedent in Kerry Lake's case. And instead of getting reprimanded, instead of getting sanctioned, the case was dismissed. The writ of mandamus was dismissed. But I was invited to participate as amicus in Kerry Lake's case, which I did. I ended up getting hired by someone named David Mast in Maricopa County, a very wealthy individual. And I ended up intervening in the Supreme Court as amicus curiae, which is a friend of the court, a third party that can provide a unique perspective parties aren't litigating. And I ended up winning as amicus curiae in her case. And her case got remanded to the Superior Court in Maricopa County for a second trial on the issue of signature verification because of my work. And so, based on that, I've been very blessed now to represent Abraham Hamadeh. We have he was the attorney general candidate here in Arizona back in 2022. And we have two lawsuits right now that we're very confident in. One of them is a quo warranto action, which is a very unique election lawsuit that allows a private individual who has been deprived of his title to office to, prove and adjudicate his title to office based on the weakness of the current office holder's status. And so we have a big hearing at the end of this month on March 22nd, and it's on the motion to dismiss. And if we survive this, it's extremely probable that Dave will become the next attorney general in Arizona.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, we've watched and followed all of the issues going on down there as we're trying to figure out what we can do in our own home state here. So you got election, you got COVID litigation, mandates. Are you a part of any of the class actions that have been spooling up?
No, I'm not. Not a class action attorney. It's never had a class certified. Never tried to have a class certified.
Okay.
I like to pick the little wars that I think I can win with my team and go rage a full out assault on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got a team. You said you got attorneys working for you now?
Yeah. So I've got two attorneys working for me. I ended up hiring the executive editor of Law Review from my class, and then another personal injury attorney in Arizona that I met up with the first COVID litigation conference works for me now as well. And we're hiring. We're looking for more attorneys to join my team. So if you're out there, if you hear this podcast, if you know people, or if you're an attorney in Arizona, we're trying to staff our office. So please reach out to me.
Excellent. And then what type of cases are coming into you, and what type are you looking for?
Yeah, so most of our work is election litigation. We have 3 election-related lawsuits right now, and those are very. We don't have many cases. Those are very brief-heavy. Because of the nature of what we're doing. We're going up against Snell and Welmer and Sherman and Howard, some of these, huge firms that can throw, a million bodies to the case and just overwhelm you with these filings. So it doesn't take many cases for us to be able to meet our billables. So we have a couple of those. We also do some defamation work as well. We have a few cases that have been filed, breach of contract for different organizations we litigate against. So yeah, mainly civil litigation. And it's a blast.
And are you taking cases from the public in general medical malpractice?
Yeah, I mean, mainly related to COVID. I would take on general medical malpractice cases if the right case presented itself, but we're predominantly interested in the COVID cases. There was a law in Arizona that was passed by Governor Ducey in 2021 that actually granted hospitals immunity, basically absolute immunity for even negligent acts related to the treatment of COVID-19. You just couldn't sue them. And that was overturned through a lawsuit called Robeck v. Mayo Clinic in September of last year. because the Arizona Constitution provides an absolute guarantee that Arizona citizens can recover for injuries and tort. It's one of the provisions that was, established at the beginning of our statehood. And you don't have the authority as the legislature, as the governor, to take away our right to recover for personal bodily injury. So Arizona is great for litigation. There's no cap on damages here as well. So, I'm expecting to have some very massive awards out of these cases that we filed. And the problem is for the cases now is that we're having statutes of limitations issues. All these injuries happened in 2021, for the most part, these, hospital protocol cases. And they're coming to us now after this law was revoked by the Arizona Court of Appeals and saying, "Can you help us?" And it's like, well, your loved one passed away 2 years ago. The statute of limitations is run, so we're having to deal with some equitable tolling issues, things of that nature, to be able to help these folks. And to be blunt, we don't have any room in our budget now to take on any more contingency cases. So if you're out there looking for help and you want us to represent you, you have to pay us. That's the nature of the game, unfortunately.
Is it possible on those cases that you just referenced, going back to 2021, that the tolling of the statute might get moved to the date of discovery? I mean, how many people knew at that time? I mean, it wasn't until they became aware of a certain
injury
type of information, right, that then caused them to say, I think my husband or my wife or my loved one was harmed here.
Yeah, a lot of it, that is a good argument to raise, and especially we're going to be litigating that issue in our Banner Health case, because our client is actually Sherry is a nurse. She's a registered nurse, and she didn't get her hands on the medical records until August of I think it was last year or the year before. Either way, we're well within the statute of limitations based on the discovery rule. So we are litigating that issue. But yeah, it's an important point. I mean, so one of the things that's interesting in Arizona is you can't have what's called a statute of repose abrogate your right. There's something called the anti-abrogation clause of the Arizona Constitution. So it can't abrogate your right to file a suit in Arizona. And that's effectively what this law did. It precluded people, because of the cost of litigation, from being able to file a lawsuit within the 2-year statute of limitations. So it effectively acted as a statute of repose. In my view, the statute of limitations should be equitably extended, from the date that law was actually struck down, so these people can recover and actually effectuate their constitutional rights.
Wow. Yes, that would make sense. That's great. So, Ryan, if people watching this wanted to call you about their case, even if your firm wasn't able to take it on for some reason, I'm speaking essentially about medical malpractice. Do you have a list of attorneys that you trust that you refer them to?
Yeah, we can refer cases. There are a number of firms around here that I know the partners that are members of these firms. So if we can't handle it, please reach out. heathlaw.com for the medical malpractice cases. If you want to learn more about the Gavel Project, or if you have the capacity to give, please do so. A tax deductible donation to the Gavel Project can be made at thegavelproject.com. And we need your support. These cases, obviously, I'm not licensed in California, so the majority of our cases are there, and we have to pay attorneys to take on these matters. So if you're passionate about these issues and you have something to give, please give generously. My family can't be the predominant funder of the nonprofit forever. It's a huge burden on our kids and on my wife. And so we give as much as we can, but we need your support.
My prediction is that that's going to change in the not too distant future. So we'll wrap up here, but Ryan, first off, man, what an interesting life you've had so far. And especially the challenges you had growing up.
Thank you.
It's an amazing story that of redemption and overcoming and then bulldoggedness, determination. Amazing. I wonder how many people wrote you off when you were younger and probably figured you might not ever amount to anything. And yet here you're taking swings at some of the biggest corporate and government black hats in the country. That's just astounding. And you're winning. That's an amazing turnaround, young man.
Glory to God. That's what I chalk it up to. It's like he uses me as a vessel, and I have a very interesting personality, and he knows I like to fight, and he knows that I'm cut out for this type of work. And I think that he rewards those that are faithful, and I've been faithful. The Gavel Project operated on faith for 2 years, and we're still operating on faith in many respects. So we're just going to keep putting our head down and driving our legs.
I know you're a long ways from the end.
Yeah.
But if it came sooner versus later, what would you what saying would you want on your headstone if there was a headstone? You ever thought about that?
It's a very interesting question. I will say I don't have any problem if it comes sooner. I've had a hell of a life, and I've given everything I have, to the world and to my kids and to everyone's kids. I'm trying to defend the capacity of our kids to be free. That's really my life's goal. And, I get threats. Occasionally I get the people reaching out to me that don't have a whole lot of nice things to say about me because of the type of work that I do. And so, yeah, I thought about that a lot, but I'd be happy if I died tomorrow. It's, I don't know as far as what I would say on my gravestone. I'm sure my wife would come up with something pretty funny and pretty accurate.
How would you like to be known, Mr. Ryan Heath?
I'd like to be known as someone who cared. I give a damn.
Someone who cared. I give a damn. That's excellent. Well, we certainly need a lot more people to step up with the same opinion, to care and give a damn. And I think that's happening. I think we're seeing it more and more. More and more are opening their eyes and their minds, and coming to the realization of what's happened to us over this last 4 years and how it's all interconnected. So I have high hopes, and I come away from meetings like we had CLC in Las Vegas, and I am totally energized for the battle ahead. I believe the truth's coming out. It's coming out every day. It's leaking out. Guys like Kirsch are making sure, and they're just going to keep jackhammering it until it's plastered, over every news service and website, and people become fully aware of it. So right. I'm behind this movement too, and man, I'm sure glad guys like you are involved. So Ryan Heath, thank you for coming on the Settlement Pros podcast. I'm your host, Jack Meligan, here to share my almost 40 years experience as a settlement planner, pre-mediation consultant, and financial advisor. I've had the privilege of working with more than 1,400 personal injury victims and their families across 44 states, and I've personally attended over 500 mediations. Throughout my career, I've encountered the full spectrum of trial lawyers, the good, the bad, and occasionally the ugly. The essence of this podcast is to guide personal injury victims towards finding true settlement pros, trial lawyers who are not just talkers, but doers, those who step into the courtroom arena ready to fight for justice. These are the attorneys who win or lose, carry the respect of their adversaries because they prove time and again that they are willing to go the distance for their clients, regardless of the outcome. That makes them dangerous to the defendants. Our mission is to spotlight these exceptional trial lawyers and settlement experts from across the country, revealing their true stories, strategies, and the passion that drives them. This platform is about weeding out the pretenders and connecting you with the contenders, the best in the business. Remember, the most compelling trait of a trial lawyer settlement pro is their readiness to embrace the courtroom's challenge, believing in the power of their client's story regardless of the outcome. So whether you're a personal injury victim seeking justice, an attorney looking for co-counsel, or simply interested in the art of trial law, this podcast aims to arm you with the knowledge to distinguish the true pros from the cons.